Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for July 7th of 2023. Currently we have a small enhanced risk set up for the northeastern region of the Texas Panhandle into the Oklahoma Panhandle and parts of western Oklahoma, as well as a slight risk that extends across northern Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle into parts of southern Kansas and southwestern Kansas, into parts of eastern Colorado and parts of New Mexico, with a pretty large marginal threat around that extends up into Canada through North and South Dakota and Nebraska and into Iowa, parts of Iowa and Missouri, and the majority of Missouri and northern Arkansas. This is probably going to be separate compared to everything further down south. And then you can see that we also do have a marginal threat for much of the New England area, including parts of northern Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, majority of New York, and parts of eastern Pennsylvania, and the majority of Maryland and northern Virginia. I probably won't cover this too much, but I probably will cover it in the triggering factors for today. As for our threats for today, we do have a 2% tornado threat for that slight and enhanced risk region. We do have a 30% wind threat with the hatch significant for that enhanced risk region on a 15% and a 5%, as well as a 5% wind threat for that marginal threat in the New England region. As for hail, we do have a 15% with the hatch significant for the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma Panhandles and parts of Colorado and southern Kansas, with a isolated 5% hail threat for the northern marginal threat that is attached to today's risk, but we don't have a hail threat for the marginal threat that is back towards the New England region. Because of this, the main threats for today is likely going to be large hail and destructive winds, and not really all that much tornadoes. However, we can't rule out the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes today. But however, again, the main threats for today are going to be large and damaging hail and the possibility of destructive winds. Taking a look at our 500 millibars like we usually do, let's start off with the enhanced risk region, and then we'll move over to the marginal threat that's back towards the New England area. You can see that we do have a little bit of a MCS going from yesterday, moving across Kansas and Oklahoma, and then into Iowa by tomorrow, and into the Chicago region. That is likely going to be carried along by this strong jet stream, and likely might trigger maybe a marginal threat or a slight risk by tomorrow for that particular region. However, for the enhanced risk region, you can see that we do have some fairly strong mid-level flow. We have mid-level flow that is in the 40 knots, possibly going up to the upper 40 knots, but mostly the mid to upper 40 knots, and the upper to mid 30 knots, but also the mid 40 knots. It's mostly in the 40, however, we could definitely see some 30s. This is likely going to be the main trigger for severe weather development, as well as the triggering factor for elongated hodographs and the possibility of some weak directional shear for tornadoes. But again, elongated hodographs for the possibility of some large hail. Then back towards the New England region, you can see that we do have a very weak shortwave trough that is associated with a weak low pressure system, I think an upper low situated over Canada. It does have an attached shortwave trough, which will lead to the possibility of some elongated hodographs, slightly elongated, which will lead to the possibility of maybe some destructive winds and maybe some isolated small hail. However, it would have been put on the SPC outlook as a 5% hail threat. So hail may not be all that plausible depending on our Cape values, which I definitely won't take a look at. However, we might see the possibility of some isolated small hail, but again, it may not be all that possible because there wasn't a 5% on the SBC outlooks. Taking a look at our dew points, taking a look at the enhanced risk region, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points. We have dew points that are reaching out into the low to mid 70s, the low mid 70s, as well as the upper and mid 60s, and not really all that much in the 50s. We are getting back into those strong dew points and no longer back into those moderate dew points, so we are definitely going to see the possibility of some much stronger Cape values compared to the last few days. Cape values, depending on our lapse rates, that could get up to the mid to possibly the upper 3000s. And for the past few days, regarding if we had strong or weak lapse rates, we did have some isolated 4000s, so we could definitely see the possibility of maybe some upper widespread 3000s depending on our lapse rates. Taking a look at our lapse rates, let's take a look at where that enhanced risk region is. You can see that we do have some extremely strong lapse rates. We have lapse rates that are going up to the upper 8s and also the low 9s. With the dew points that we have, we definitely see the possibility of some upper 3000s again. If they weren't already possible with those dew points, we could definitely see some K values that do reach the upper 3000s being reinforced by these extremely strong lapse rates. And as well as that extremely strong instability regarding these lapse rates, we could definitely see the possibility of some very large hail that could develop, possibly gorilla hail in the enhanced risk region because of extremely strong lapse rates. That is going to bring down the layer of ample hail development further down to the ground, which will be easier for those strong updrafts to reach and aloft rain particles to get into the optimal hail development layer with strong lapse rates. Much easier with strong Cape values and strong lapse rates. And then that will also cause those hail particles to fall much quicker in large quantities. Taking a look at our instability, you can see that we do have some fairly strong instability. We have Cape values in the enhanced risk region that are getting up to the upper 3000s and the widespread mid 3000s and possibly also the widespreads upper 3000s, and you can see a little bit right here upper 3000s. But then we also have the possibility in that enhanced risk region of getting up to the 4000s in some isolated pockets, like especially right in there we could definitely see the possibility of Cape values that do reach the upper 3000s and low 4000s. Regarding our lapse rates and our possibility for elongated photographs, we definitely see the possibility of some very large hail to possibly gorilla hail to develop in this particular region, as well as the possibility of some destructive outflow gusts, as well as with this Cape values and whatever wind shear we have, we could see the possibility of maybe 1 or 2 brief tornadoes regarding our wind shear. Taking a look at our wind shear, you can see that right around storm development time, after storms have already developed and are beginning to move through the Texas Panhandle, you can see that cluster of storms here. So what we're looking for is the wind shear ahead of those storms. You can see that we have some fairly weak overall wind shear. However, that wind shear should definitely be sufficient enough for that 2% tornado threat and the possibility of 1 or 2 brief tornadoes as storms move through this area, a very weak wind shear. However, this could also be a lot of speed shear, which could lead to the possibility of elongated photographs and the possibility of some large hail. And especially with our strong mid-level flow, we definitely see the possibility of overall much stronger speed shear compared to directional shear, and the possibility of some very large hail regarding this wind shear and our cape. We could, again, definitely see the possibility of some very large hail and very damaging hail as well. Taking a look at storm relative helicity, I may not have all that much to say about this, but it is very good to look at as it does take a look at our directional shear compared to our speed shear. So you can see our storms here, and you can see how overall ahead of those storms we do not have overall very strong directional shear at all, or any signatures for storm relative helicity, and it is mostly in the weak. However, we could definitely see maybe some weak storm relative helicity signatures in the region, or it could also be usable behind the storm systems. However, I don't really think that's all that possible, and I think with storm relative helicity signatures like this, we could have the possibility of a very weak 2% tornado threat, and again reinforcing the fact that our main threats for today are going to be mostly large hail and damaging hail, and the possibility of destructive winds, as very weak wind shear and directional shear is going to lead to the possibility of very weak tornadoes. Again, we could definitely have the possibility of 1 or 2 brief tornadoes today with wind shear like this, but again, our main threats for today are going to be large and damaging hail and destructive winds. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And if you live in any of the areas that I covered today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow in another forecast.